Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome to the Networking RX podcast. I am your host, Frank Agin, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. As you know, this is a podcast about professional relationships. It's about business networking. And a big part of that, I mentioned know, like, and trust. People know, like, and trust. And I talk about adding value to others. Now, you can add value to others in lots of different ways. You can add value by introducing them to contacts, giving them referrals, sharing information, pointing out opportunities for them, sitting and listening to them, helping them on their social media, shares, comments, and likes. There's lots of ways that we can add value to others. And adding value really all stems back to one thing, the general notion of generosity, just giving to others, expecting nothing in return. Certainly this is an intriguing concept, at least for me, because I think to be successful in this world, professionally or personally, you need to find ways to contribute to others. And it really kind of harkens back to our time when we lived in caves or on the grassy plain in our tribes or our clans, and you really only knew about 150 people, and you needed to contribute to that greater good of that tribe or that clan, or you were out. And to be out was literally a death sentence because you couldn't make it on your own. You probably can't make it on your own in today's world, but certainly more so back then. It's more about prosperity today than it was back then. Back then it was just mere survival. But one of the things I want to talk about, or I really want to focus this issue on, is organ donation, and why I think that's, does that really have a play into business? Well, arguably not. It doesn't. I'm certainly somebody can point to an example where it might, but what it does it speaks to people's general generosity. And organ donation is really has its own history, and I'll kind of quickly get into that and where it's gotten to, or where it started and where we're going with it, or where it seems to be heading. And generosity is a huge part of this. So what I'm going to do is, this is really going to be a two-part series. Today I'm going to talk about organ donation and what they term daisy chain transplants. And then next episode, I'm going to be interviewing somebody who's actually been involved in one of these things and just kind of talk about the process. Today, kind of give a 50,000-foot view of the process, but to actually talk to somebody and just really kind of what went on in their mind when you read these articles about, so-and-so donated a kidney to somebody they didn't know. It just says that. It really doesn't go into, hey, this is what moved me to do this. And so that's going to be the second part of this program here as we kind of head towards the Christmas time. It's a perfect time to kind of talk about these things and the spirit that moves us to give to other people. And really the spirit that moves to give to other people, add value to other people, really manifests itself at the holiday season. Whatever religion you might be, it really kind of manifests itself this time of year for whatever reason. Just part of our culture. But it's that same spirit of generosity that can carry over into the rest of the year. You shouldn't just be generous in late November, early December. It's something that you need to really take on as a lifestyle. You need to look to contribute to other people, find ways to help other people year round. So let's talk about transplants. In 1954, the kidney was the first human organ to be transplanted, to be successfully transplanted. And then liver, heart, and pancreas transplants were successfully performed in the late 60s. So basically, you almost have a 16-year period where the first kidney was done, and then we start getting into other organs. But let's back up a little bit. Let's talk about the history behind donations, of organ donation, or this process. Obviously, in 1954, Dr. Joseph Murray, who was in Boston, didn't just roll out of bed and said, "Hey, let's do this." There was some thought that went into it. Hey, could we do this? And certainly there was a need. There was a set of identical twins, and one needed a kidney, and the other one had two. And so they kind of thought, and hey, is this possible? Could this be possible? And so they were certainly pioneers with respect to that. Um, and modern technology has certainly provided us with all sorts of resources to be successful. I tell people that it's a great time to be alive. I have a friend who needed his hips replaced. He's mid-40s, needed his hip replaced. And I told him, I said, it's a great time to be alive because 30 years ago, they'd have just put you in a wheelchair and said, hey, good luck, enjoy as much as you can. And he's got a great life. He coaches football. You never would know. So we do live in a great time. But we live in a great time because of everything that's kind of happened before all of this. Now, some of the first recorded attempts, transplants were bone transplants, and they date back to the Middle Ages, but obviously medicine at that point was not sophisticated at all. Didn't understand germs, didn't really understand where babies came from. And so it was a lot of, quackery. Brave souls is probably the best way to put it. And then in the late 19th century, I wouldn't necessarily call it late, the 1869, there was a successful skin transplant. It was performed by a Swiss surgeon, and that led the way to more skin grafts, which were performed in Denmark in the 1870s. So there's kind of a history here. People are kind of wondering, and I was reading some articles about in the First World War, there were a lot of people who were horribly maimed in the war. If you know anything about the First World War, it was trench warfare, and there was just a lot of people were maimed. Their faces were maimed, and they wanted to try and give these people normal lives, coming back to society. And there were masks that were made for them that looked real, looked as if but they were masks. Imagine, if you will, the Phantom of the Opera type masks, and these were masks that people wore that actually made them look normal. And so all these things are kind of leading up. People are looking at this and say, hey, how do we make this better? How can we make this better? And so they start thinking about transplants, and then Dr. Murray in 1954 successfully transplants organs between these twins. And then from there, it kind of rolled forward. The first transplants were between identical twins, and then in the late 50s and the 60s, there were transplants between fraternal twins, twins that aren't identical. My wife and her sister are not identical. They're fraternal twins. And then it kind of led into siblings. They're kind of pushing the envelope here. And in 68, they started getting into other organs, getting beyond just the kidneys. They're getting into livers, they're getting into hearts, they're getting into all sorts of things. It's like anything. Society, knowledge builds on itself. You learn what numbers are, you learn to count, and that leads the way for you to do addition, subtraction, which leads into multiplication, and then division, and then fractions, and then you're moving on into algebra and geometry and so on and so forth, and it builds and it builds and it builds. And the same thing with respect to medicine. It's just kind of building. All through the 70s, it's building. At this point, kidneys are just commonplace. They do them all the time. And then you get into the 80s and you start talking about lungs and double lung transplants in 1986. And I found a statistic here that in 1989, there were 200,000 tissue transplants in the United States alone. So we've just kind of, it's gone from this one kidney a few decades earlier to just, this is what there are doctors whose entire careers are about transplants. Now, obviously, the first transplants, in 1954, there was a set of twins, and one was certainly trying to give to his identical twin, and fraternal twins and siblings, and that's helping a family member out. But when you start getting into hundreds of thousands of people, you need a source for organs, and there's not always a family member who's available. There's not always a family member who's a match or who's willing, um, or who's known or alive. And so that became a problem with respect to donations, is that they really needed people to donate. And a big push that they have in the country, in the United States, is to get people to indicate on their driver's license, hey, I'm willing to donate. And that's something I've done. I figure, if something happens to me, if my organs are still intact, then why not? Why not just let somebody else have them? More information than you need. I would rather be cremated than buried, so why not? Take what you need and share it with somebody else. Cremate me and move on. And so they have this issue with respect to trying to find organs. And it's an ongoing issue. You have people who are on waiting lists. They're on waiting lists for years, and some people die on waiting lists. But what's happened in recent years is that people have engaged in these transplant daisy chains. Now, how do these daisy chain transplants work? I actually found an article called "How a Daisy Chain Kidney Transplant Works." It March 12th, 2009. And it kind of goes through step by step. There's a number of steps to this. Matthew Jones decides he wants to donate a kidney to a stranger. When a Buffalo, New York medical center was unable to make a match, they referred him to the Alliance for Paired Donation in Ohio, an organization that helps link potential donors and recipients. At the time, Jones was 28 years old. The Alliance found a match for Jones, Barb Brunell, 53-year-old grandmother in Phoenix, Arizona. Jones then flew to Arizona and donated his kidney to Bunnell. Through that, they discovered that Barb Bunnell's husband was a match for a woman and these are all strangers, Angie Heck, 32, in Ohio. So he comes to University of Toledo Medical Center and donates his kidney to this Angie Heck. Well, Heck's mom found out that she was a match for a woman that was in Ohio, and the procedure was done at the Ohio State University Medical Center. Well, this woman who the daughter of a woman who got a kidney found out she was a match for somebody in Chillicothe, Ohio, which is south of Columbus. And again, that was done at the Ohio State University. So essentially, this goes on and on for 12 steps. Somebody kicks this thing off. Matthew Jones decided he was going to donate a kidney, and this is back in 2007-ish. He decided he was going to donate a kidney, and this, he gives it to a woman who's in desperate need of a kidney. She's 53 years old, and that woman's husband is so grateful for this selfless act by Matthew Jones that he gets tested to see who he might be a match for. And it turns out that he is a match for somebody, and the person receiving that kidney has a family member who says, you know what, wow, this is really great. I'm going to get tested. And then the next person tests, and the next person tests, and it goes on, and it goes on, and it goes on. And this article has it going on for 12 steps. And the 12th step, there was a woman, Catherine McKinney, who received a kidney from the brother of an individual who needed a transplant. And this was done at the University of Toledo. And then this woman, Catherine McKinney, her daughter Helena, has promised to donate a kidney to someone else who needs a match when that match becomes available. So it just, and obviously that will continue on and continue on. In fact, I found an article, the longest kidney chain ever completed. It included 68 people, 34 donors, 34 recipients at 26 hospitals nationwide. And I don't know. Who knows if it's completed? That's where it's at right now, because people's generosity is inspired by other people's generosity. And it just goes on and it goes on and it goes on. Uh, to me, this is fascinating. I think this kind of plays into professional relationships and business networking, because we have to find this sort of generosity, this sort of selflessness to help other people, knowing that, it might not come back to us. And that's not necessarily the point, or maybe it's something that somebody has done something for you and you want to pay it forward. Somebody's done something nice for you, referred you a great client, and sort of inspires you to pay it forward. Well, you did something for me. I'm going to find somebody that I can do it for. You've taken me under your wing. I'm going to take somebody else under my wing. I was at a networking event and somebody really made me feel like, I was welcome. I need to do that as well for somebody else. And that's how I see this as really kind of, it's kind of an odd example perhaps, but generosity is really generosity. So at any rate, next episode, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually interview somebody who has participated in this, and get her story as to what prompted her to do this and really what's become of it afterwards. And I kind of know the story. I don't want to give it away. But it's an interesting story, and it's certainly a personal story, but it also kind of works its way over into a professional life as well. So you got to tune in for the next episode to get that. How's that for a big tease? Let me wrap up this one by saying, if you know an entrepreneur, business owner, or professional that seems to enjoy networking and appears well connected and somewhat involved with the chamber or another professional networking organization, they would be a great person for me to meet. As you know, being networked is vital to success, and receiving referrals is the most effective means of generating business. Receiving a kidney is the most effective way of staying alive. But at any rate, if you know of such a person, such a business professional, work into the conversation a rhetorical question like this. If you had a choice, would you rather be a renter or the person who owns the building? Now, they'll probably chuckle at the question and indicate somehow they would obviously rather own the building than being the person who's paying the rent. When they do, indicate that you're familiar with the franchise opportunity through AmSpirit Business Connections, where they're not just paying to be part of a professional network, but rather they're instrumental in building professional networking groups and profiting from them. From there, suggest they contact me using the email we provide at the end of the program or within the show notes. Or better yet, email them and then on that same message, put my email in there, which again is in the show notes or at the end of this program, and that'll connect the two of us. I would appreciate that.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connections. All rights reserved.